So what happens when a cow gives birth? So the veal is almost immediately taken away from his mother, so we can use the milk that was destined to him. If the veal is a female, she will be fed a milk substitute with certain chemicals to allow her to become mature as soon as possible to follow her mother's sad destiny. If the veal is a male, he will be put in one of these boxes where they cannot turn around and be fed another array of chemicals to allow the very fast growth. In 16 weeks, he will get to the weight required to be sent to the slaughterhouse and eaten. So you can see how the meat and the dairy industry function hand in hand, and that the veal industry is a byproduct of the dairy industry and needs the dairy industry to survive. So veterinaries, all over the world, and factory farm workers, and even the American Veterinarian Medical Association testify that the separation of the veal from his mother are extremely painful for both of them. Cows are showing this, lethargic behavior, stop eating, and the veals, again, according to veterinaries, display clear signs of behavioral issues and psychological issues. So talking about illnesses and mutilations, most cows suffer from diseases called mastitis, which is an inflammation of the udders. Those cows are plugged to milking machines about 300 days a year. And they also suffer from lameness, which is a very painful disease of the legs and hooves. Mutilations, so I mentioned before that veals were dehorned. Many dairy farms practice tail ducking, which is they cut their tails. Okay, so now you understood, I guess, how factory farms operate indoors. I would like now to tell you what is the impact of this industry on our planet. So, in 2006, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations stated that the livestock sector is a major stressor on many ecosystems and on the planet as a whole. Globally, it is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gases and one of the leading causal factors in the loss of biodiversity. So this statement is 10 years old. Things have only gotten worse. So first, let's talk about water. With water, we have two problems. The first is the amount of drinkable water factory farms use. 29% of the planet's drinkable water is used on cattle or livestock. It is quite shocking to know that when you learn that 1 out of 6 people on this planet do not have access to drinkable water, more than 1 billion people. So why is so much water needed? So for 1 pound of beef, you need 2,000 gallons of water. This is the amount of water we use over 6 months to shower. So this water is used first to water the crop that will feed the animal. It is then used to give to the animal while it's alive, and finally during the slaughtering and meat packing processes. So in comparison, to produce a pound of wheat, you need approximately 140 gallons of water. The second problem with water is the waste that it creates. So to give you an idea, North Carolina has about 10 million hogs. Those 10 million hogs produce every year 19 million tons of manure, which is filled with all the chemicals we talked about earlier. So factory farms are the #1 polluter of waters in the US. Not only they're the biggest source of water pollution, it represents more pollution than all other industries combined. So this is huge. Again, more pollution than all other industrial sources combined. So what they did do to try to manage all this manure? In 1972, under the Clean Water Act, the government told factory farms, you need to deal with that. So what did they come up with? They create waste lagoons. These lagoons are filled with manure. There's 3 here, and you can see the farm here. And they are left there. But of course, you can imagine that very often they leak out. And we will get to this a bit later. So now let's talk about forests. No good news here either, unfortunately. Every minute, the equivalent of 7 football fields of forests are cut down only to allow cattle to graze. 90% of the Amazon forest that has been cut down since 1970 is used for livestock. And of course, with the loss of forest, we have a huge problem of soil erosion and a loss in biodiversity. The FAO stated that factory farms are responsible for more than 40% of this planet's loss in biodiversity. So I like this picture a lot, if I could say, because it shows you the deforestation for the cattle. It shows you these manure lagoons that are here and the farms in the middle. So it creates a problem when you know how densely populated these farms are. You have so many animals so close to waste and so close to dead animals, because many times the slaughtering process is there. So for the hygiene, it can cause many problems. So now let's see what is the impact on our health. So let's talk about public health first. The first main issue with public health is that 80% of the antibiotics used in this country every year are used on livestock for non-therapeutical purposes. It was discovered that when given a small amount of antibiotics, since a very young age to animals, they grow faster. So this is why they are given antibiotics. And also to avoid infections. You can imagine in those cramped areas that you cannot afford any diseases. So 80% of antibiotics are used on livestock. Why is that a problem? So the WHO stated that this widespread usage of antibiotics in factory farms puts modern medicine into grave danger because it favors the emergence of bacteria that are resistant to one or more antibiotics that are used to treat humans. So every year, according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, 2 million Americans are infected with such bacteria. And out of them, 25,000 people die. In Europe, it's the same number. About 25,000 people die every year because of infections from bacteria that have no antibiotics that work against them. So the second problem with public health, we kind of talked about it just now, are these manure lagoons. So this is a satellite picture. So what you see here are what is called feeding lots. CAFO, Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. This is where cows go before they reach the slaughterhouse. And this is the manure lagoon. So we saw how the hygiene in those facilities is really bad. Outside the facilities, same thing. You can imagine that this leaks out and can reach us, either through infected waters, either through the infection of the very products factory farms provide us with. This is how every year 76 million Americans are infected with E. coli or salmonella, either through infected waters, either through the consumption of dairies or meat that are infected. So we have talked extensively about factory farms, but I haven't gotten yet to the heart of the subject, which is the product factory farms provide us with, right? Many of you believe that we need those animal proteins to survive. So let's see what those prominent public health agencies say about this matter. So they tell us that all the research shows in Europe and in the United States that vegetarians have 40% less chance of developing cancers than meat eaters. So you have all heard this relationship between meat and cancer, but maybe it's not clear why. So first, meat is devoid of fiber, antioxidants, and other protective substances that are found in plants. The processes of cooking and transforming meats, by transformation I mean making sausages and cold cuts, produce highly carcinogenic substances. Also, the high fat content of meat increases our hormone production, which is linked with cancers such as breast and prostate cancers. And finally, the high chemical content of meat that is linked to cancers. Also, animal products are the #1 source of saturated fatty acids that are linked to obesity and cardiovascular diseases. So a few of you are still skeptics and you're thinking, okay, factory farms are bad, okay, we could get cancer, but at the end of the day, we're omnivores and we cannot go without those animal proteins, right? We would disappear. Humanity could not survive without it. So I am not going to tell you what I think about it. I will tell you what the Dietary Advisory Committee says about it. This committee is composed by 15 prominent scientists in nutrition. They are dietitians, researchers, and doctors. Every 5 years, the government, the US government, asks this committee to produce a document that is called the Dietary Advisory for Americans. And this is the nation's go-to document about nutrition science. It is used as a reference for all the recommendations for the military, canteens, school, hospitals, and even all over the world. Scientists in this area consult it. So the last of these documents was published in October 2015. And it was the first time that it included a chapter about vegetarian diets, because more and more people are asking about this. So what did this document say about eating animal products? So they stated that consuming animal products is not necessary for a healthy life. A well-rounded vegan diet is not only complete nutrition-wise, it can also be beneficial in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases and is suitable to all stages of life, including infancy, pregnancy, and old age. So I'm going to pause just so you appreciate that statement. So this will conclude the more scientific or data-oriented part of my expose. We tried to stay very factual, out of the emotional, and really, give you data that is available for everyone online. In my conclusion, I will try to appeal more to your emotional side or philosophical, maybe even spiritual side. So before I get into this, to make the transition, I would like to show you a little movie. It's just 1 minute that illustrates what we have seen. So I'm not a great tech